And we're on.
Hello and welcome to the PFF Q&A chat. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Guys, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good. We got a good friend Brad back here after we didn't have him here last week, but it's always better when we have all three of us. So that's great. And week 2 of the preseason in the book, so we're getting closer and closer to the real games, which is obviously very exciting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, yeah, Brad, how are you doing today on your week back?
Doing well. Yeah, I agree with everything Ari said. And yeah, I had some relaxing time in California. So ready for the season to finally kick off here.
I'm still out on the road, which is why I don't have my fancy backdrop behind me, but I will be coming back from California very soon. Let's start off with some disappointing news. Carl Lawson out for the season for the New York Jets. That happened in a practice, and that was a high-priced signing addition for the Jets, expected to really contribute for them this offseason or this season. And now they kind of have to scramble a little bit as they look for a replacement. Currently on their roster, John Franklin Myers, Bryce Huff has been a standout this summer. Beyond that, there's not a lot of names on this roster who should be able to contribute right away, which might have them looking outside of the organization for help. But they just gave this 3-year, $45 million contract to Carl Lawson. I'm not sure how much more now they want to invest draft capital-wise or money to now try to find his replacement when they might not actually be that competitive this season anyway.
Yeah, the Jets really can't catch a break right now. I mean, that defense this offseason, bringing in Robert Saleh, they needed a premier edge rusher to effectively run his defense, and it looked like Carl Lawson was going to be that guy based off everything we were seeing in camp. He was really the star of training camp for the Jets. And then this happened. And looking at their roster right now, they have a couple of veterans who could fill in. It's obviously impossible way to fill in what Carl Lawson does and his talents. But for a team that has a mediocre secondary like the Jets do, they were going to rely on the defensive line bringing the pressure. And without Lawson, that's obviously going to be a very big hit here this season. So Robert Saleh has a lot of work here to do with this defense. We could talk about a couple of guys who are available on the street right now, like an Olivier Vernon who's out there. But when it comes to pass rushers who are available via trade, the only one who you think would be a possible guy would be Chandler Jones. But I don't see the Cardinals doing that. I don't see the Jets giving up any of the capital that will be required to make that happen. So it's a bit of a tough time right now for the Jets. Besides for Lawson, I mean, if you look around, they also lost Jared Davis today, who's going to be out until week 6. Elijah Moore, who we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, is banged up right now. I know, Doug, you reported he'll be fine, but he's not practicing right now. Elijah Vera Tucker is not practicing right now. Even what happened to like Zach Wilson with his quarterback coach, suddenly passing away in a tragic accident. I don't think that's being talked about enough. The Jets have had a lot of rough breaks right now here throughout the training camp before the season starts. And as we always say, the biggest thing for training camp is to get out of it all healthy. And so far, the Jets have not had that at all.
Yeah, I think it cannot be overstated how big of a loss this is for Robert Saleh's defense in particular. Obviously, a premier edge rusher matters to every defense, but we're talking about a guy that in San Francisco, the 49ers made Dee Ford one of the highest paid edge rushers in the NFL a couple of years ago, $17 million per year deal, and then a month later used the 2nd overall pick on Nick Bosa when they already had, DeForest Buckner in the fold. He prioritizes up front. He's made that clear. Our coworker Richard Sherman even said as much on the Chris Collinsworth podcast, basically discussing how as long as the front is settled with a solid defense, the secondary can be a little bit weaker and they can kind of get around that. But this Jets secondary is far worse than anything they dealt with in San Francisco. And so I think this is a huge loss. The Jets do have a strong interior still, and so maybe they try to replicate that. Their neighbor, the New York Giants last year, where the interior was solid. They did not have edge rush talent, but they were able to get in the quarterback's lap and create issues. But this is a massive loss for that Jets defense.
Boss Zone 2 put in the comments, Winovich. Chase Winovich for the New England Patriots. He's kind of buried on that depth chart, but I'm not sure how much the Patriots would want to help an in-division rival by trading a player like Chase Winovich to New York. So, it might be worth it to get something for Chase Winovich since he is currently buried on that depth chart. But once again, those trades between the Patriots and Jets, although they have happened more in recent years, are definitely extremely rare. Let's get into the Jamal Adams contract a little bit. That happened basically right after our show on Tuesday. We're here every Monday. That happened on Tuesday. Definitely a massive deal for Jamal Adams. Very important for the Seahawks to get that done after dealing the 2 first-round picks to the Jets for Jamal Adams. But this resets the safety market a little bit, and that is becoming a higher price position in the NFL. Guys like Jesse Bates, guys like Harrison Smith now might be looking for new deals, around this $17-18 million per year territory. So definitely a good for Jesse Bates, good for Harrison Smith, not so great for those teams now who have to pay up to keep those players.
No question about it. This changes the landscape at safety. I think even saying that, though, after you trade 2 first-round picks, this is pretty much near the floor of where, in my opinion, I thought they could get a deal done. If you look at some of the prior trades, like a Khalil Mack, like a Jalen Ramsey, those guys are boosting their position market by a larger percentage than did Jamal Adams. So, yeah, $17.5 million per year at safety is very necessary for the position group. They were lagging behind even the running back market at this point. And so he does go ahead and put them ahead of Christian McCaffrey. And he now makes more than any running back. And as you mentioned, I think Harrison Smith in the next couple of weeks here will probably join him in that Justin Simmons range, around $15 million per year. And then, like you said, Jesse Bates the following offseason, a couple other guys, Marcus Williams in New Orleans as well. But that position is still very interesting, how teams are approaching it, how teams tend to value it. With so many guys coming through the draft and things of that nature, it does seem like it's getting harder and harder for these top safeties to, get a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. And probably one more safety we could mention is Tyrann Mathieu in Kansas City as well, who's entering the final year of his contract. One thing on Jesse Bates, and others report out there that both sides are not really close to it. One thing about the Bengals when it comes to their negotiations, they've had a history of getting deals done pretty late. If you look back a couple of deals that they've done, Joe Mixon last year happened in September. Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap both happened in late August. AJ Green happened in September. Vontaze Burfict happened in September. Happened in September. So there's a history there of getting deals done late. I know right now both sides are a little bit far apart from where they want to be, but when it comes to the Bengals, they have a history of, taking this to the very end. So while we might think it might not happen this year and you might get the franchise tag next year, there's still a possible scenario where it could still get done here in the coming weeks.
Let's get into the Atlanta Falcons quarterback situation a little bit. A.J. McCarron suffered a season-ending injury in the preseason game this weekend. They've got Matt Ryan, then Felipe Franks, an undrafted rookie, as the only other quarterback on the roster. And, sometimes rookie quarterbacks can be backups. We've seen it throughout the years. But Felipe Franks, when he was coming out of Arkansas, was really thought of as a bit of a project. The fact that he's an undrafted free agent obviously doesn't help things as well. So I definitely think the Falcons have to look to improve that backup quarterback situation. There are some connections around the league as far as guys who are still available via free agency and who might be available in a trade that could be appealing to the Falcons. Deshaun Kaiser was with the Titans back in 2020. He's a free agent. Brian Hoyer, he was actually on the 2016 Bears when Dave Ragone, who's the Falcons offensive coordinator. So there's a connection there. Beyond that, you're looking at some of the Buccaneers quarterbacks. Maybe one of those guys could become available. Blaine Gabbert, who's on the Titans with Arthur Smith. Ryan Griffin is another guy if they don't want to keep the 4 quarterbacks on the roster. And then beyond that, just some bigger names. Gardner Minshew from the Jacksonville Jaguars, always rumored to be on the move. Josh Rosen available. And then Ryan Finley, also a recent 5th-round pick, also available. So not the greatest options out here. Gardner Minshew, definitely the most experienced. But if I'm the Jaguars, I might just want to keep him around just in case. He's a good quarterback, and they might be demanding a pretty penny to deal him at this point.
Yeah, Gardner Minshew has been a name that's been out there, throughout the offseason. There was a bunch of rumors that it could happen early. It still hasn't happened. Now Urban Meyer is saying that he's competing with Trevor Lawrence, which obviously nobody is buying, but that's probably to boost up his trade value. But I'll probably give one more name here for you. Kurt Benkert in Green Bay, who used to be with Atlanta, has been getting some reps there with Jordan Love, obviously banged up. Will Green Bay keep 3 quarterbacks? We're not sure yet. So if he ends up going on the waiver wire here with cutdown day coming up, Atlanta is 4th on the wire, so they could easily claim him. I know he's like a little bit of a fan favorite there in Atlanta. It was a different regime, but I think that's another name to keep an eye on as well.
I think this is a big signal for the Falcons season this year. I think a recent trend across the NFL that we've seen pretty much since, Nick Foles, who's also, I guess, a name to kind of keep in the back of your mind. But
For sure.
third quarterback in Chicago. So obviously, and he's made some recent comments that he's not, super ecstatic with the situation, but it does sound like he essentially has the power to kind of veto trades and basically tell clubs, like, I don't really want to be there. So, you shouldn't trade for me and have to pay me, a decent amount of money still. But I think that the tell is if they don't make a move, in my opinion, it's them saying, like, we know we're not that good for 2021 and that we don't need to have that safety blanket of if Matt Ryan misses 4 or 5 games, can a backup go 2-3 or 3-2 to keep our season alive? And I think a lot of good teams have realized now, like, you should kind of calculate in the probability that you lose your starting quarterback for a couple games. And if you want to remain competitive for the full season, you need a competent backup. If they don't do anything, I think it's kind of them saying, we're riding out with Matt Ryan. If he gets hurt, he gets hurt, and so be it. We don't think it's going to impact, our wins and losses at the end of the year, whether it be making the playoffs or not. The name that jumps out to me is Gardner Minshew, though. I think it makes a ton of sense. Yes, the trade may be a bit pricey. They may be trying to push for, maybe a 4th-round pick. Maybe they want even a 3rd. I don't think anyone would go that high. But really cheap contract as a 6th-round draft pick. The Jaguars have 3 guys. They took, they signed C.J. Beathard to a decent backup deal contract. It just doesn't make a ton of sense for them to carry him in addition to those 2 guys and Jake Luton. So I think that is kind of the obvious one. But like you said, it could be too pricey where Atlanta, again, says, why are we going to spend that much to kind of marginally, if at all, improve our team?
Yeah, I think that Luton is another guy who could be mentioned. Even the guy like C.J. Beathard, like you said, they signed him, but he's a guy who could be dealt. And yeah, definitely Nick Foles, certainly a possibility as well. Let's get into the David Njoku situation in Cleveland. It seems like he can't really make up his mind about whether he wants to stay in Cleveland, whether he wants to be there long term. The latest is that he does want the extension. But at this point for the Browns, I'd say that, the most likely scenario is probably to let him live out the contract and then probably let him leave or see how the season goes. I don't think that there's really a priority to give him an extension at this point, given the fact that they do have Austin Hooper on the roster. They've got Harrison Bryant, who's an ascending player. David Njoku, a 3rd tight end is nice to have, but it's not something that you probably need to prioritize extending at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right, especially for a guy who's coming off a year with just 19 catches and 213 yards. And we know when it comes to an extension, it takes 2 sides to tango to make it happen. But it's a little bit of an interesting story behind this whole David Njoku thing, because he was originally with, if we want to go into the weeds a little bit, he was with Malky Kawa, with his agent when he got drafted. And then he wanted out of Cleveland, and then he saw Duke Johnson do it a year before, getting out of Cleveland, getting traded and requesting a trade and making it happen. So he went to that same agent in Drew Rosenhaus, and it just simply did not work out. So now he's back with the same agent he always had, which was Malky Kawa, and now he's saying he wants to stay there. But again, like you said, I mean, the Browns have 2 tight ends there who they really like, Austin Hooper, who they paid a lot of money to, and then Harrison Bryant, they drafted last year in the 4th round. And Njoku has dealt with injuries. It's been a bit of a problem for him. He hasn't really produced when he's on the field. So I think probably the best thing for him is actually to go on the field this year, have a good year in the final year of his contract, and then see where it goes from there, whether it is going to be from the Browns or hit free agency and have a few teams go after him as a free agent on the market. So I don't see an extension actually happening here. It doesn't really make sense from a different from few angles, but we'll see what happens there. But he's more than likely to end up playing out his contract, and we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, I think with Njoku, honestly, a bit of a surprising move. So this year was the last year where a first-rounder's 5th-year option was not fully guaranteed the moment it was signed. So Njoku, as a member of that 2017 class, the Browns could have cut him after last season and been on the hook for $0. They elected to carry him, through the offseason. And then as soon as the 2021 season begins, it becomes fully guaranteed. It's about $6 million for him this year. And frankly, I was surprised that happened at all. He even himself kind of tweeted something to the effect of, I'm still here, I'm still on this roster. So I don't even think he thought, he was 100% assured to be on this team. It sounds to me more just like something you would say that you're motivated, you love where you are, you're a team player, you're bought in, all of those things. I don't see a way forward where the Cleveland go ahead and pays another tight end. Even with Austin Hooper's money kind of running out somewhat soon, they have too many guys to pay. Trying to work in a Denzel Ward at corner, and Baker Mayfield obviously at quarterback potentially. So I don't see it. But it is interesting. Him and O.J. Howard, really fascinating tight ends, first-round guys going into that fifth-year option contract year, with some injury history and lack of consistent production. But at their peaks, phenomenally athletic, can make plays that very few guys can on a football field. It's just a question of how often and how consistently they can do it.
Final topic that we'll get into here a little bit is that Robbie Anderson reportedly is nearing an extension with the Carolina Panthers. And this seems to make a lot of sense for both sides in my mind. Robbie Anderson had the best season of his career reuniting with Matt Rule with the Carolina Panthers, had a 1,000-yard season last year. Probably won't break the bank on an extension, but he gets his money now. Carolina Panthers lock up really their number 2 wide receiver behind DJ Moore. They've got Terrence Marshall in there as well for the future. We don't know the terms of this, but like I said, I can't imagine this being anywhere near a top of the market deal for Robbie Anderson. So I think it does make sense to lock up one of those dependable pass catchers in that offense if they can.
Yeah, per Joe Person, who works in the Carolina beat, sounds like an extension is imminent there, and it's a fascinating move. He like you said, reunites with his college coach from Temple and Matt Rule, and he signed a 2-year, $20 million deal, but effectively a prove-it deal. Where after that first year, if he had a good season, you probably thought this was going to percolate and materialize. I agree it's not going to break the bank, but he's still not an old player. Still, one of the faster and great burners on the outside. Now reunited with also his former quarterback with the Jets, whether he's happy about that or not, and Sam Darnold. I think he could get, a 3-year, $45 million deal and kind of get that pay bump and that, more significant, more substantial deal, which is very interesting to see because, DJ Moore, stud first-round draft pick in 2018, is eligible for an extension as of right now. They also could carry him through his 4th year with the 5th-year option already exercised there. So there is flexibility, but pretty interesting if he gets a deal. Are they then going to become one of these teams paying, 2 receivers top money? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in Carolina.
Oh, for sure, 100%. We'll see when that deal gets done. For now, it's simply a report, but I'm very curious to see how those numbers actually do come out. I think 3 years, 45 kind of makes sense, 15 a year, but it's going to be interesting to see how that goes because, again, he's entering the final year of his contract. Would it be better maybe just to play it out and then end up being a free agent next year and have more teams trying to get him? So is 15 really the number? Maybe it'll be a little bit more to make sure he avoids the open market. So we'll see how that all plays out. It could happen this week. And if it does, those numbers will be very interesting.
One just final thing to get to before we get out of here. I thought it was interesting that Cam Newton will not be practicing until Thursday. There was some COVID protocol issues. He left New England's facility. He was getting tested daily, but there was some sort of break in protocol. I'm not sure if it wasn't the right test. I'm not sure if the testing wasn't on time, but he cannot practice today, Tuesday, or Wednesday. He'll be back on Thursday for the Patriots joint practice against the Giants, but it's not as if he's running away with that quarterback competition. I'd say that, the coaches keep saying that Cam Newton is the starter. They have not said that Cam Newton will be the starter in week 1. I know that that's a point that I made on last week's show as well. But Josh McDaniels, the Patriots offensive coordinator, even said yesterday that Bill Belichick will decide who will be the week 1 starter when the time comes. So I'm not sure how much it will really affect things, but if Mac Jones shines today, shines tomorrow, shines on Wednesday against the Giants, and if they know that he will be around every day in the facility, that there won't be this COVID protocol break, because it appears, based on some reports from Tom Pelissero, that this means that Cam Newton is not vaccinated. Who knows? The Patriots could decide to take what might be the safer option in the rookie. I know that's kind of contradictory in a sense, but if you don't know, if you can't count on Cam Newton, which right now the Patriots can't, that could affect things moving forward here a little bit.
No, for sure. And this is exactly when we say competitive advantages of being vaccinated versus unvaccinated. This is the perfect example of something happening to a player who is unvaccinated. Cam is clearly unvaccinated based off the rules here of him traveling out, and clearly something went wrong there. I'm not sure where the misunderstanding happened, but whatever it is, he's now off the field for the next 5 days until Thursday. And Mac Jones is going to get more reps. He's going to have more time to shine. He's going to get first team reps. And as you said, Doug, I mean, they're not officially saying that Cam is the guy. So if it was right now 55-45 Cam, that could easily swing over to Mac Jones here this week because Cam is not going to be on the field at all. So far through 2 preseason games, Mac Jones has looked pretty good in that offense. I mean, he looks confident. He's making all the right reads. I mean, it's been impressive to see so far. So I think this is the perfect example of somewhere where a guy who is not vaccinated falling into a trap, and now someone else might overtake him. And this should be a message to everyone around the league who is not vaccinated, because there are a handful of players who are starters who are still not vaccinated. We know this for a fact. And this type of thing could happen around the NFL this season, and we're seeing it happen right now in New England.
Yeah, I don't want to go through a whole kind of spiel about Cam Newton's decision regarding the vaccine, but I do think it's worthwhile to mention he arguably is the player that his financial future, and I get that he's already worth a ton of money and has no worries there, but we've seen consistently in this league, if you play a few good games at quarterback, you can turn that into an 8-figure contract. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater starts 5 games in New Orleans, gets a 3-year, $60 million deal. Yes, he only earned about 30 of that, only $30 million. I mean, Cam Newton is arguably risking 8 figures by not doing this. It's I don't know. It's very difficult to see. But honestly, I think a larger takeaway, and Doug, you'd get this more than anyone on the planet, the Patriots are the most detail-oriented organization maybe on planet Earth. The fact that there was a mix-up here and whatever the confusion was or kind of not getting the protocols correct, really surprising for them as a team that, finds every loophole, but also just, make sure that they're following every rule to the letter to find a competitive advantage in that area as well. So that was a takeaway I had, also in reading this.
Yeah, I mean, even just some background intel on the organization right now, the media who have to get tested for COVID testing, they are not allowing it from any other outside vendors. You have to get tested at Gillette Stadium on a certain day every 2 weeks. There's no exceptions. There's, reporters who live out in New Hampshire who have to come down for an hour and a half, take the test on an off day and go back. So that just tells you how detail-oriented they are and even how seriously they're taking it with the media. So this is definitely a major surprise that something like this would happen with the starting quarterback of the Patriots of all teams. There was a comment, do we know that Mac Jones is vaccinated? We don't know that for sure, but we also know at this point that Mac Jones wasn't the one who traveled out of state and somehow broke protocol with the testing. So I'm not saying that this means that Mac Jones is going to be the week 1 starter or that it's going to have long-term ramifications on this competition, but it does play a factor, and that's the most important thing. Keep it on PFF.com for all of your news on cutdowns. There's more cutdowns coming on Tuesday as teams have to trim their roster from 85 players to 80. Follow Ari at MySportsUpdate on Twitter. Follow Brad at PFFBrad. Follow me at Doug Kyed. And we will be back with you guys every Monday to talk about the biggest topics of the NFL and to answer your questions. Thanks for joining us.